Part 27. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 267. Maybe talent is the key clue. Kaylan murmured to himself. Humans. Key clues, the hound couldn't help but muttered. How could humans become the key clues in the secret room built by the Alpha civilization? They don't even know what kind of creatures humans are, so how could they put the clues to solve the puzzle in Inhumans? But the spiritual attacks in the ruins are effective on humans, aren't they? Kaylan said. I have an idea, I think I can try it. Hearing what Kaylan said, Hound immediately asked, what do you think? When he just explored these stone chambers, Kaylan had already marked all 9 of them with serial numbers with a highlighter. The left half of the prefix, that is, the 3 rooms on the west edge are No 1, Number 2, and No 3, the 3 rooms connecting the axis in the middle correspond to 4, 5, 6, and the ones on the east edge are 7, 89. Ian's idea was to move Cao Fan, Ufan, and Asano Akira into 3 stone rooms that were not connected to the axis, and put them on the stone platform to see if any changes would happen. They directly selected the 1, 2, and 3 stone chambers on the near side and carried the 3 of them to the stone platform inside. Didn't nothing happen, Hound said with some disappointment when he saw Asano Akira lying on the stone platform in stone room number 3, it seems like all the efforts were in vain. No. I think it's because we are missing a key factor. Kaylan shook his head. Key factor? What factor? They have all been injected with Menzeo preparations and neutralizers, and are now in a dreamless sleep. They are no different from other people. Kaylan said. You mean, you have to be someone who is having a nightmare. Don't you forget the control variable method that you learned in the primary compulsory education stage. Nightmare is obviously a crucial experimental variable. I know, but, what do you do to make them return to their original state? Perform another mental attack. When I came into contact with those crazy hunters at Nottingham General Hospital, I found that alpha language will have a strong stimulation on them. Maybe I can try this method. Kaylan took a look at the inventory in the medical kit, counting the items he had received from Nottingham before. Of the 3 Menzeo preparations that the hospital director sent me, there are still 8 in total in stock, which is enough to deal with the aftermath. Kaylan walked to Asano Akira's side, leaned close to the other person's ear, and recited a few prayers on the stone tablet in an alpha-civilized way. Suddenly, Asano Akira's face changed while he was sleeping, and his fingers subconsciously formed a fist. The hand holding the knife was trembling constantly. Fortunately, in order to prevent Akira Asano from hurting others in an unconscious state, Kaylan had taken away his war blade in advance and bound his hands and feet with safety belts. Among these 3 people, the strongest one is Asano Akira. The stronger the strength, the more dangerous it is when losing one's mind. To be honest, this kind of attempt is extremely risky, but Kaylan can only do this. Other than that, there is no better choice. Old dog, keep an eye on Asano Akira. If anything happens, call me loudly. After Kaylan finished speaking, he walked to the other 2 stone rooms, and followed the same pattern to make Yvonne and Cao Feng fall into a nightmare again. Just when the last step was completed, the floor under my feet suddenly shook. With the sound of friction between rocks, these stone chambers began to move. Kaylan ignored the horror in his heart and quickly activated the ability to stop time. Taking advantage of this short gap, he forcibly moved these stone chambers. The movement trajectory was recorded. Not long after, the 9 stone chambers returned to calm, and the dust settled, and everything seemed as if it had never happened. The joints between the stone chambers, and between the stone chambers and the rock formations were tightly sealed, and it did not look like they had been moved at all. The arrangement shape of the 9 stone chambers is still the shape of the Chinese character. The only thing that has changed is that the stone chamber where Asano Akira and the others are located has been changed to the connecting axis in the middle. The original stone chamber numbered 1, 2, 3 has just been swapped with 4, 5, 6, It's really humming evil." There was a slight tremor in Hound's voice. "Kaylan, did you see clearly just now? I just felt like the world was spinning for a while, and by the time I realized it, it was all over. Damn it, I didn't even see how these stone chambers moved." "I haven't seen it either. The design of the mechanism is very clever. When these stone chambers move, the surrounding rock formations will also move with them. They will block the gaps in the movement in time, so that the stone chambers people can't see what's outside at all," Kaylan said. "However, I forcibly recorded the movement of the stone chamber. The movement trajectory of the stone chamber is not purely flat. To write it down requires a strong sense of space and perspective ability. P.S. Perspective here does not refer to the special ability of sight to penetrate obstacles, but a theoretical term in the field of painting. Fortunately, Kaylan has the ability to stop time. Even if he cannot see the accurate movement trajectory at first glance, he can continue to press the pause button to conduct more detailed observation and analysis, thereby obtaining a dynamic three-dimensional image. The moving trajectories of the stone chamber just formed several characters in alpha language. Kaylan recalled this dynamic three-dimensional image. He simplified and folded those trajectories, and then re-outlined them with lines on the two-dimensional plane. From looking at it from different angles, the characters are different, but there is evidence to follow between these characters. I can follow this rule to connect these strings. Then what do these strings mean when connected? The Hound asked urgently, eyes wide. There is only half a sentence, and the meaning is unclear. You have to find the second half of the sentence to connect it before you can understand the meaning of these characters, Kaylan said here, suddenly raised his head and looked at the other side of the stone room. 7 or 89. Since the strange changes of 1, 2, and 3 have formed half of the sentence, then let's carry Asano Akira and the three of them up to the stone platform of number 789. Can't we get the second half of the sentence? Just as they were told, Kaylan and Hound moved the three of them into three other stone chambers. This time, the stone chamber moved again, but its movement trajectory became very strange. These lines don't form a group any complete character. These power outages and turning points are all wrong. Kaylan looked at the images he drew in his notebook and couldn't help but fall into confusion. How did that happen? P.S. In order to give everyone a more intuitive concept of the arrangement of the stone chambers, I will sketch directly in the text. Wall 1, Wall 7, Walls 2, 4, 5, 6, 8. Wall 3, Wall 9, Wall. Among them, 3 is the stone room where Kaylan woke up, 1 is the Hound, and 4 is the room where Cao Fen was at the beginning, which is also where Kaylan and the Hound met. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 268. How about trying again, said the Hound. Try again, wait a minute, I know what's going on. Kaylan suddenly raised his head, a bright light flashed in his eyes. This mechanism is like a Rubik's Cube, because we didn't have any after the first turn. Resetting will cause the trajectory formed by the second rotation to become garbled. Reset? Do you mean to move the three of them back to number 456 first? Yes, first let the stone chamber return to the state it was in before we woke up, and then make another transformation. The movement trajectory obtained in this way will be completely different from the trajectory obtained without reset for the second time. I tried to simulate it in my mind. After a while, I can vaguely piece together a few complete characters, which shows that this idea is correct. Then hurry up. I see the doctor that he can't hold on any longer, Hound said while already carrying the man on his back. First reset the stone chamber number 456 to the connecting shaft in the middle, and then move the three of them to the corresponding stone chamber number 789. Finally, the content of the second half of the sentence came out. What exactly did the sentence say? Hound asked impatiently after Kaylan injected the medicine into the three of them. When the silver ring and the golden ring overlap. Kaylan said silently. Anything else? Gone. No more? Isn't this just the first half of the sentence? What's the content of the second half? Hound said in astonishment. That's what the two half sentences together contain, and that's roughly what it means. Kaylan shrugged, but my translation may not be accurate because I can't understand the two words in this sentence. Word. What two words? Silver ring and golden ring. Literally speaking, they are a golden ring and a silver ring, but I don't know what special meaning they have in the language of Alpha civilization. Does it mean a ring made of gold and silver? Hound asked as an example. No, 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 Kaylan shook his head. In the Alpha text, gold and silver in metals and gold and silver are completely different phrases. This sentence only mentions the color and does not mention the material. But the problem is that there are no gold or silver rings in these 9 stone chambers, except for stones. They are still stones. The hound squatted on the ground, picked up the water bag and took a sip, and said angrily, "This clue is useless." Looking at this brainless clue, Kaylan couldn't help but fall into confusion. When the silver ring and the golden ring overlap, what do these two rings symbolize? What is the meaning of overlap? There were clues, but Kaylan felt even more confused. Let's eat something first. After all, we have been trapped in this place for more than 10 hours and haven't eaten anything yet, Hound said, taking out a compressed biscuit from his backpack, tearing open the outer packaging and breaking it into pieces. He took down half of it and handed it towards Kaylan. More than 10 hours. Kaylan took the biscuit and subconsciously glanced at the watch on the hound's wrist. It was an old-fashioned mechanical watch with a spring as the power source, although its functions were not comparable to those on the market. Compared with various high-tech timepieces, its only advantage is reliability. All parts are forged with diamagnetic alloy, the shell is mixed with a large amount of nano-alloy, and the dial is polished from the empty shell of energy crystal. It can achieve accurate timing even in the harshest environments. Kaylan also has a watch like this. Like the hunting dog, it is made by a factory called Young Precision Machinery. This factory specializes in producing various precision mechanical equipment for elite hunters. In addition to their high prices, their products there are almost no shortcomings outside. I know what this sentence means. Kaylan stared at the dial on his wrist and said with some excitement. What do you mean? What do gods and demons mean? The hound quickly swallowed the biscuit crumbs in his mouth and asked. The golden ring and the silver ring refer to the double moons, which are the two natural satellites of Alpha Star. Due to the different elements contained in the stars, one of the double moons appears golden, while the other is silver, which exactly corresponds to the gold and silver colors in this clue. When the rings overlap, it means that their orbits coincide. Oops, that was a slip of the tongue. The hound also reacted. Does it mean when the double moon and the Alpha Star are in the same straight line? This phenomenon is called bilunar eclipse by humans. Since the orbits of the two moons are on the same horizontal plane, bilunar eclipse occurs very frequently. Calculated based on the revolution periods of the two moons. A bimonthly internal eclipse occurs almost every 35 hours. How long has it been since the last bimoon inner eclipse? Hound asked. Exactly 30 hours. In other words, there are still 5 hours until the next double moon inner eclipse, which is what this clue says is when the golden ring and the silver ring overlap. Wait. The hound crumpled the biscuit packaging bag in his hand into a small paper ball and held it in his palm. I hope there will be a surprise in 5 hours. Just when the bilunar inner eclipse was still in its last half hour, 2 people among the people who had fallen into the dream world woke up first. The 2 people who woke up were both trainee hunters from the Polar Star hunting group. When they saw the stone chamber in front of them, their first reaction was very similar to Ian's. They also drew their guns, but they drew a blank. In order to prevent accidental injuries, all the weapons of people in the dream world have been taken away by Kaylan and the hounds in advance. Yes, he is very alert and has no faults with his emergency response. He is a good candidate. Hound sat on the corner of the stone platform and looked at the 2 people. Where is this? Why am I here? "Who are you?" The trainee hunter named Martin looked around in surprise. When he noticed Cao Feng lying on the ground, his surprise turned into a fear. You killed Cao Feng." "Martin, don't get excited. Cao Feng is not dead, he is just in a coma." The person who spoke was not Kailan or the Hound, but another trainee hunter and the only woman among them, Qin Zhao. "Oh, I take back what I just said. You are a grown man, but you are not as calm as a woman in this situation, and your observation skills are not that good." "It's so shameful," Hound teased with a half smile. "They don't have any ill intentions towards the rookies of the Polar Star hunting group. If possible, they wouldn't mind poaching a corner and attracting these young people, of course, that is, provided that these rookies can gain their approval." "Are you also hunters?" Qin Zhao took a look at Kailan and the Hound's costumes and made a judgment. "Can you tell us what happened before this?" You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 269. Sorry, I was just a little too. The hunter named Martin said with some embarrassment, "The last thing in my memory, the last thing I remember was that there was an explosion and an avalanche." Memory? Finally, Kailan narrowed his eyes. "Don't you remember what you just dreamed about?" "A dream? What dream?" "Does it mean when I was in a coma?" Martin said in shock. From his very natural expression, it could be seen that he was not lying. Kailan and Hound looked at each other and nodded to each other. It seems that the mental attack of the bottomless sinkhole is not a covering strike. Like Martin and Qin Zhao, they obviously have not suffered from nightmares. It was just that he was knocked unconscious. "You two, can you tell us what happened? Also, where is this place? Could it be at the bottom of the sinkhole?" Martin looked at the stone room in panic, and stood there. Qin Zhao next to him was much calmer. She lowered her head and didn't know what she was thinking about. "We don't know where this place is, but it's probably not far from the sinkhole," Kailan said. "As for what happened before, the exiles convoy attacked the observatory and your Polaris camp, and the explosion triggered the avalanche. Like you, we were all affected and fell into the sinkhole, and when we woke up, we were already in this place. In other words, we were moved into the stone room." Qin Zhao raised his head, frowned slightly, and looked at Kailan and asked. "Probably, but it's hard to say whether the people who moved us are people." "Then let's find a way to get out of here now." "I always feel that it is very dangerous to stay here," Martin said quickly. "We also want to leave here, but there is no exit from this place." Hound shrugged. "There is no exit? How is it possible? Then how did we get in?" While Martin was still shouting, Qin Zhao had already walked to an adjacent stone room, and her voice came from the next door. "These stone rooms, is every room the same?" "There are 9 rooms in total." "They are all the same," the Hound replied. "No need to waste time. We have already checked them countless times." "Then we are trapped here and die." Martin looked a little depressed. "When I fell from the pit wall, I thought I was dead, but who knew that I was not dead? I am not dead, but I want to live. I can't survive either." He knelt on the ground, raised his head, and said with a sad face, "I don't want to die, I'm still a virgin, and there are still many things I want to do that I haven't done yet." Hearing his lament, the Hound suddenly burst into laughter. He turned his head and looked at Kailan, but was stared back fiercely by the latter. "We are trapped to death, but not completely." Kailan glanced at the watch. "There are still 25 minutes left, and the mechanism in the stone chamber should be activated." "Agency? What agency?" When he heard that there was hope of getting out, Martin suddenly became energetic and straightened up and asked. Qin Zhao also quickly returned to the stone room, staring at Kailan with burning eyes. "I don't know. The only clue we have is the bilunar internal eclipse, and there are still 24 minutes until the nearest bilunar internal eclipse, Kaylan replied. Wait and see what will happen then. I advise you not to be too happy too soon. No one knows what will happen, maybe nothing will happen, Hound added. Why 2-month internal eclipses? Qin Zhao took a step forward. How did you get this clue? This involves trade secrets. You are a member of the Polaris hunting group. There is no way we can tell you, the Hound said, suddenly showing a wicked smile and patting the holster on his waist. Of course, if you really want to know, I can also tell you, but after I finish speaking, I will silence you. How about it? How about becoming a seeker of knowledge who hears the Tao in the morning and will die in the evening? I don't want to know, I don't want to know at all, please don't tell me. Before Qin Zhao could speak, Martin had already lied on the ground first. He closed his eyes tightly and covered his ears with both hands. I was afraid that I would accidentally hear the trade secrets from the Hound. Then, forget it then. Qin Zhao looked timid and shook his head gently. In the final analysis, they were just a group of rookie hunters with little experience, and they were too immature in front of Kaylan and the Hounds. There are still 20 minutes, Kaylan said calmly. The Hound walked over and pulled Martin up, who was lying on the ground. The latter suddenly trembled with fear and thought he was going to be silenced. Why are you so cowardly? How dare you explore S-class ruins if you are so cowardly? The Hound was so angry that he slapped the opponent's butt hard. Because, they said, this ruins is not dangerous, the casualty rate is almost zero, and the people who died were all caused by operating errors. I just came. Martin said timidly. They also said that this ruins may be downgraded soon, so hurry up and come here before it is downgraded. This way the reward will be much higher, and it will also give you an S-level exploration qualification. They said this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. His speech was not very clear, but Kaylan and Hound still got a general idea. Hound sighed and shook his head unbearably. Who are they? People from the Polar Star hunting group. No, it's the people I met at the hunter-gathering place and the bar. They said they have reliable connections and can introduce me here for only a small agency fee. My feelings were sold and I'm still counting the money, Hound said. You have all been deceived. There are indeed very few people who died in this ruins, but more than half of them went crazy after going back. Presumably they didn't tell you this. Crazy? Martin was stunned and asked in disbelief, what's going on? Psychic attack. There should be some devices in the ruins that will launch spiritual attacks on people who enter the sinkhole. This kind of spiritual attack cannot be detected by human senses. Anyone who is attacked will fall into a nightmare. I can't help myself. Kaylan said. So, why did you ask us if we were dreaming just now? Qin Zhao said. Yes, Kaylan had no intention of hiding this matter. Anyway, this was a dispute between Qin Zhao and others and the Polar Star hunting group, and had nothing to do with them. Then they, Cao Feng and the others were mentally attacked. Qin Zhao looked at the people lying on the ground. 3 of them can be confirmed to have been mentally attacked, but I have injected them with Menzao preparations and neutralizers, so there is no danger for the time being, Kaylan said. The only problem is that they have to wait for 2 hours. Oh, no, based on the injection dose, I'm afraid it's more than 12 hours. Kaylan received another injection later. Based on this calculation, the sleeping time of Cao Feng, Yufan, and Asano Akira will be extended to more than 20 hours. What about the others? They should just be unconscious. Before Kaylan finished speaking, Leighton had already sat up from the ground and mumbled a little dizzy. Where is this? Wait. Didn't I fall into a sinkhole? Old dog, Kaylan. Stop barking, everyone is alive. The Hound stepped forward, kicked Leighton on the butt, and then pulled him into a nearby stone room. There are some things that Qin Zhao and Martin cannot know, otherwise, according to what the Hound said, they can only be silenced. Not long after, Zwilajitu also woke up. Through communication, he learned that Leighton and Zwilajitu also had no nightmares, or in other words, they didn't remember it at all. Kaylan looked at the watch again. There were still 2 minutes left before the double moon inner eclipse. At this point, Qin Zhao suddenly spoke, can you give us our weapons? If something unexpected happens then, Martin and I can also provide you with some support. Support? Hound glanced at Martin, who was standing behind Qin Zhao. If something unexpected happens, are you sure this kid won't accidentally hurt one of your own in his haste? No, 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 it won't happen. Martin hurriedly defended, I got full marks in the shooting subjects in the Relic Hunter entry assessment. Thanks to the fact that you scored full marks in shooting, which helped you gain a lot of points, otherwise I would have suspected that you failed. Hound complained, with your mental quality, no matter how good your marksmanship is, it won't be of any use. Shoot and kill targets and shooting monsters coming at you are completely different things. Strange, monsters, Senior, have you ever encountered monsters in the ruins? What do those monsters look like? That's a lot. Just when Hound wanted to brag, Kaylan interrupted him, stop bragging now, there are still 30 seconds left. After saying that, Kaylan turned his head again and said to Leighton quickly, Leighton, return the gun to them. If something really jumps out, it is impossible for us to allocate manpower to protect them. How much will it cost? Give them some ability to protect themselves. Hey, go on. Leighton threw 2 pistols in holsters to Qin Zhao and Martin. Rookies, remember, never point the muzzle at your own people, even if the safety is turned off. Not even the right time. He only gave each of them 1 magazine. In Leighton's view, if 1 magazine couldn't solve the problem, a few more would not help, especially for such an inexperienced rookie. Giving them a gun is more effective in emboldening them than in self-defense. 5 seconds. Kaylan stared at the pointer on the dial. Everyone held their breath involuntarily. They felt that the last 5 seconds seemed to be extremely long. The slender second hand seemed to be stuck with glue and did not beat for a long time. It seems like nothing happened, Hound said softly. He held the gun tightly in both hands, raised his head, and carefully looked at the ceiling above his head. SHH, there seems to be some sound. Kaylan made a silent gesture, but the next second, his expression suddenly changed, the sound of water. It's the sound of water. Although there were no gaps or holes visible on the floor of the stone chamber, a large amount of clear liquid emerged directly from the floor, and in the blink of an eye it had covered the insteps of everyone. Lift up the man lying on the ground, shouted the Hound, put him on the stone platform. The liquid quickly reached the height of Ian's chest, almost flush with the surface of the stone platform. Just when Kaylan was worried about how to solve his breathing problem after the stone chamber was filled, the water level finally stopped rising. It seems to have stopped. Martin couldn't help but said. He glanced at Kaylan and the others. What are we going to do? Let's test the composition of these liquids first. Kaylan nodded to Leighton and said. This thing is serious water. According to the analysis results, it contains a certain amount of mineral impurities, but it is not toxic, has no radiation, and no parasites or other microorganisms have been found. From a certain perspective, generally speaking, it is cleaner than most water sources in Alpha Star and fully meets the 4th level drinking standards. Can you drink it? The Hound was stunned for a moment and couldn't help but pick up a handful of water, put it in front of his nose and smelled it. You can drink it after a little filtering. Leighton nodded. But that's not the key. The key is, where does the water come from? Kaylan said solemnly. It's impossible to achieve this flow rate just by the small gap at the connection between the stone chambers. You mean, maybe a certain channel was opened, and the water was poured in from this channel? The person who spoke was Qin Zhao, and Kaylan couldn't help but look at her more. This young girl, although she is a trainee hunter, she is calm and quick in thinking and reaction. If they can get out alive, they can consider absorbing her into the hunting god hunting group. After all, a consortium-level hunting group cannot always rely on the 6 of them. If you want to grow it, you must absorb fresh blood, and this Qin Zhao is a good seedling. In contrast, the one named Martin behaved as normal as most rookies should. Yes, so I suggest that everyone spread out and look for the entrance of this passage. The bi-moon inner eclipse lasts for less than 4 minutes. After this point, the passage may be closed, so you have to hurry up. With that said, Kaylan found a breathing mask from the equipment bag and put it on his face. Old dog, take Leighton and Jolajitu in that direction dash. He pointed at Qin Zhao and Martin. You two, follow me. The water is not turbid, and the visibility is not bad, but since there is no light source in the stone room, and it relies entirely on flashlight lighting, it is difficult to see the underwater scene clearly across the water. Kaylan can only dive into the water while moving forward. Swim around, examining the underwater walls and floor with your light. As for the part on the water, it was handed over to Qin Zhao and Martin, who did not have breathing masks. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 270. While Kaylan was searching for an exit, he was thinking about the connection between these clues, the double moon eclipse and the sudden influx of water into the stone chamber. The combination of these 2 points made him think of the gravitational tide between celestial bodies. Could it be said that part of the mechanism of the stone chamber is controlled by the tidal force between the twin moons and Alpha Star? But the amount of calculations involved in these data is too huge. Let alone Kaylan, even if he were a professional astronomer here, without the help of a computer, it would be difficult to calculate all the details. And it is even more impossible to use these data to infer the structure of the ruins. At this moment, the cry of the hound came from another direction. Found it? The exit is here. Stone room No. 7. In the northeast corner of stone chamber number 7, an opening about 1 meter square appeared under the water. This opening was connected to a horizontal passage. The length and width of the passage were also 1 meter, and the direction was from south to north. The surrounding the material of the passage wall is similar to that of the stone chamber. The only difference is that the surface is covered with a layer of greasy scale. Kaylan dived down and took a look. He could not see the end of the passage with his naked eyes. I have used a laser to measure the length of the underwater channel, Leighton said. It is exactly 460 meters. At the other end of the channel, there is also an upward opening. Based on the analysis of the path of light refraction, it should be empty, no water. The exits and passages are very narrow. If they want to pass through this passage, they must take off their powered exoskeletons. And burly men like Zwilligitu and Leighton even have to tighten their bodies. Only when you get up can you barely squeeze in. I got into this place, I can't even move. Jolajitu gestured towards the entrance of the passage and said with a look of embarrassment. It's not a big problem, Leighton said, raising his robotic arm and shaking it. There is a propeller device in my robotic arm, which can be used as a power source for underwater propulsion. All it takes is a rope to move it. If everyone is connected in series, I can lead everyone through this passage. The time required is estimated to be about 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Hound looked at the breathing mask in his hand. For us, holding our breath for 3 minutes is not a big problem, but what will they do? Naturally, he was referring to the 3 Ivans who were still in a coma. The Hound continued, there are only 2 respirators. This passage is so narrow that people are as crowded as sardine cans when they get in. There is no way to go back and ventilate them. Then can you seal their mouths and noses with tape? As long as they can survive these 3 minutes, Leighton suggested. No, Kaylan shook his head. They have all been injected with Menzeo preparations and neutralizers, and their current state is the same as a deep coma. If you put them in a state of suffocation, their brains may suffer from lack of oxygen. And 3 minutes is too long to cause irreversible damage. But I have an idea. Kaylan took out a roll of polymer fabric from his backpack. When he unfolded it, everyone discovered that it turned out to be a body bag. Although the name of this thing is not very auspicious, many hunters who work in teams will still add a few body bags to their equipment list, even if the original function has no chance to be used. Disassembling the bag can still be used as a full bag. Used as waterproof materials or bandages, its versatility can be said to be quite extensive in wilderness survival and ruins exploration. A body bag, this is indeed a solution. This thing is waterproof. As long as you put some air in it, it will last for 10 minutes, Hound nodded. Soon, the sleeping Ivan, Asano Akira, and Cao Feng were put into body bags. As for the 2 breathing masks, they were set aside for emergency use. Everyone connected the 3 cables and fixed them with the safety buckles on each person's waist. Then they connected the 3 body bags end to end and strung them on the ropes. As for the exoskeletons and other equipment that had been taken off, it was dragged at the end of the cable. Led by Leighton, everyone took a few deep breaths and then got into the underwater passage one by one. Kaylan was in the second place in the queue. After entering the underwater passage, the people at the front of the queue crawled forward on their hands and knees for a while. After everyone came in together with the 3 body bags, Leighton opened the propeller in the machine, dragged everyone along the passage to speed up. Everything went smoothly, there were no extra mechanisms in the underwater passage, and there were no accidents when the team passed through it. Even the passing time was exactly the same as Leighton estimated. At 3 minutes and 9 seconds, the team was in the same position. Leighton, who was at the head, reached the end of the channel first, and at 3 minutes and 38 seconds, the equipment bag hanging at the end of the cable had been dragged out of the water. But when Kaylan saw the scene at the other end of the underwater passage clearly, he couldn't help but hold his breath. An inexplicable chill spread from the depths of his bones and climbed up his back bit by bit. A spacious and regular space, a corridor big enough for 3 Junius off-road vehicles to pass in parallel, black ice as dense as steel. They are back again, back under the glacier, in that weird ice road. This place, we seem to have been here before. Leighton subconsciously took a step back, and Kaylan could clearly hear the sound of his teeth chattering. It was not because of the cold, but because of fear. The Hound silently put his hand on the holster. If you shine the flashlight on him, you can clearly see that his fingers are trembling involuntarily. Among the 4, only Zwilligito's situation was relatively better, but it was only better. If this is really the original ice road, if the things Kaylan has seen are not hallucinations, they all know what kind of things they may encounter next. The only ones who didn't understand the situation were Qin Zhao and Martin. Have you been here? But, isn't the deepest distance of the Tianquan less than 500 meters? What is this place? Qin Zhao asked softly. She felt that something was wrong with Kaylan and others' emotions. Driven by this atmosphere, even she herself became a little nervous. This is not a sinkhole. The Hound uttered a few words with some difficulty. This is, NOAA-087. Glacier Ruins. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 271. A-087 Glacier Ruins. The twin ruins of the bottomless sinkhole. Qin Zhao's eyes flashed with shock. You said you have been here, are you the one who found the core of the glacier ruins? District's legendary team. So you are my idols. Can you sign your autograph for me after we go out? Martin asked excitedly. Legend team. Idol, Hound smiled a little self-deprecatingly. If possible, I would rather not have this title than come to this ghost place again. Why? Since you were able to survive from here last time, then this time. Quiet Kaylan turned around and glanced at Qin Zhao and Martin coldly. Listen clearly, I will only say this once, don't make obvious noises, don't use any equipment that emits strong light, always pay attention to the top of your head. If there is any movement from the ice under your feet and on both sides, You should immediately stop your actions and use body language to warn your teammates. Is there something in the ice? Is it a monster? Martin asked, stammering. Senior, you don't scare me. Shut up, the hound whispered. I'm too lazy to scare you. If you want to save your life, just do as we say. Hound said so, but in fact, even he himself had no idea, although the memories of everyone except Kaylan had been modified by some unknown force. The process of that battle Kaylan was. I told each of them that if Asano Akira hadn't taken action, everyone in the team would have been killed by that centipede-like monster. But now Asano Akira is still sleeping, they can only rely on themselves. Kaylan held up the flashlight and carefully walked to the ice wall on one side. He put the flashlight on the ice and then gently turned the adjustment knob to increase the brightness little by little. Inside the ice wall, there is nothing. There were no strange pieces of meat, nor was there a giant eyeball that could move freely in the ice. There was nothing in the ice wall, just like when they returned from the 100-meter giant door. It shouldn't be the same ice path, Kaylan said to the hound in a very low voice. There should be many such ice paths, and this is just one of them. Then where do you think this path will lead? To that giant 100-meter gate. I don't know, but the A-087 ruins have sunk deep into the ground. Even if we can find the 100-meter giant door, it will be difficult to get out of the ruins, Kaylan said, and what we found at that time may only be a shallow layer. The false core. Fortunately, we did not conduct further exploration of that place, otherwise, the glacier ruins would have collapsed long ago. But no matter what, at least we came out of the 9 stone rooms. There is only one road in front of us now, and we have to walk on it bravely. The hound pulled out the pistol and checked the magazine for the last time. Bullet. Because there was no intention to go directly into the ruins at the beginning, and there was basically no possibility of a battle, Kaylan and the others left most of their weapons on the grease. Now there is only one weapon that can be taken out. It's just a pistol for self-defense. Among them all, Layton has the strongest firepower. Although he doesn't even have a pistol, he has a large number of weapons installed in his mechanical body, plus the small shield generator. He was equivalent to a humanoid tank, and the vanguard position was naturally transferred from Kaylan to Layton. Let's go, Kaylan took a deep breath and said. Layton nodded silently. He placed the shield-shaped mechanical arm in front of him, his other hand on the rocket launcher on his shoulder, and walked step by step deeper into the ice tunnel. Immediately behind him were holding pistols, flashlights, and hounds. 2 rookie hunters were in the middle of the queue. Then came the strongman's Wilajito carrying 3 body bags. Kaylan took the initiative. Responsibilities after discontinuation. The most nervous among them was Martin. He originally wanted to talk to Qin Zhao, but Qin Zhao ignored him completely and could only sit there alone and keep mumbling in a voice that only he could hear. His eyes were always fixed on the heels of the hound in front of him, and he did not dare to raise his head to look around. On the other hand, Qin Zhao, although her face was also very pale, she had been carefully observing the surrounding ice walls, and from time to time she would raise her head and glance at the top wall of the passage directly above. The quality gap between these two people is really too big. Kaylan muttered in his heart, but what he didn't expect was that the first person to notice the abnormality was Martin, who had been staring at the floor. Just when the team was more than 100 meters away from the exit of the underwater passage, Martin suddenly stopped. He pointed at the ground under the hound's feet, with a look of horror on his face. Just when he was about to scream, Qin Zhaojiji reached out his hand and covered his mouth. And when Qin Zhao looked towards the place that Martin knew, his whole person suddenly trembled violently and froze in place. What's going on? The hound walking in front noticed something was wrong. He turned his head, first glanced at the frightened 2 people, and then lowered his head. What the hell is this? The hound performed better than the 2 rookies, but only he knew, when he saw what was under the ice. His shirt, which had not yet dried out, Suddenly it was soaked with cold sweat and stuck to his back in a sticky state. "Stop moving forward." Kaylan raised his hand to signal everyone to stop, and then walked forward quickly. It was a hand with a bone structure similar to that of a human, but definitely not a human. The surface of the palm is taut with pale skin. No blood vessels can be seen under the skin, and there does not seem to be much muscle. The structures of the phalanges, metacarpal bones and carpal bones are clearly visible. Just like humans, each finger except the thumb has 3 bendable sections. Joints, and the ends of the fingers also have nails made of cuticles. However, this palm is too slender. Although its width is about the same as a normal human palm, the length from the wrist to the fingertips is nearly 30 centimeters. The elongated phalanges and metacarpal bones showed a strange and morbid tension. He only stared at the palm for a few seconds, and the image of it penetrating his chest already appeared in his mind. A heart-grabbing image. It doesn't look like a hand, but more like a weapon made specifically for killing people. This palm was stretched out from the depths of the ice, and its fingertips were less than 1 centimeter away from the ice. From Kaylan and the others' angle, they could only see a section of the forearm below the wrist. As for the real body of the palm owner, it is completely hidden in the darkness. "This posture is like..." Kaylan murmured. "Like what?" "It's like a person who is about to drown reaches out his hand and tries hard to touch the water," Kaylan said. "You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 272. At this moment, Martin suddenly let out a sharp scream. Its fingers seemed to move. "Don't talk nonsense," the hound glared at Martin fiercely, but when he looked back at the hand under the ice, he found that the middle finger and ring finger of the hand seemed to really beat. The amplitude of the beating is very small, so small that it is almost negligible, but the hound can be sure that it is really moving. "Get the hell away. This damn thing is still alive," he yelled, raising his gun and pointing it at the ice. He flicked his thumb and opened the pistol safety with a click. "What should we do?" Layton glanced at Kaylan, then turned to look at the hound. Should we strike first?" "Wait a minute." Kaylan raised his palm and made a stop gesture. "This thing may not be able to break through this layer of ice. If we take the initiative to fire, we will actually be helping it." While they were talking, the top joint of the finger suddenly bent about 20 degrees. Then, a burst of fine cracks spread from the fingertips and quickly reached the surface of the ice. It seems to want to crawl out." The hound held his breath and said to Kaylan in a very low voice. "The tenacity of a monster that can survive in such an ice layer is simply unimaginable, and the strength required to break through this layer of ice is even more terrifying. If such a monster enters this ice tunnel, if so, the outcome of their team can be imagined." Crack. The sound of the ice cracking could be heard clearly. At this moment, Kaylan remembered the scene when he and Layton encountered the giant eyeball in the ice tunnel. "Everyone, be silent, don't move, turn off all light sources," Kaylan said quickly. He took the lead in turning off the tactical gun light mounted on the pistol, while Hound and Zwilligitu also immediately extinguished their flashlights. Immediately, even the laser transmitter used for auxiliary aiming on the weapon was turned off. In contrast, Qingzhao and Martin's movements were slightly slower by half a beat. The ice tunnel suddenly became invisible, and Kaylan could only hear his own rapidly accelerating heartbeat, and the click sound of the ice breaking. But soon, the click sound disappeared, the ice layer was not broken, and the owner of the hand did not climb up from below. This state had been in a stalemate for more than 10 minutes. Just when everyone felt their ankles starting to go numb, Kaylan finally turned on the gun light again, adjusted the brightness to the lowest level, and shined it on the palm of his hand. Location. The hand had disappeared, leaving only a few small cracks on the ice. A mist-like white cold air was constantly emerging from the cracks, and then quickly melted into the relatively high temperature in the ice channel. The hand disappeared. Martin shrank his shoulders and held the gun tightly with both hands. Could that thing have crawled out? He didn't dare to look back at all. He always felt that something was lying behind him. As soon as he turned around, that thing would immediately pounce and pierce his throat with its 5 slender fingers. This crack, not even a bug can get through, let alone that thing just now, Hound said. On the contrary, I think that thing might have sunk. Kaylan didn't speak. He looked deep into the ice beneath his feet, where there was nothing but endless darkness. It's better to be careful, the visibility of the ice is less than half a meter. Maybe the thing is less than 1 meter away from us, but we can't see it at all. Kaylan said, Leighton, leave a warning beacon here and we'll move on. Got it. Leighton dug out a small piece of special explosive like plasticine from the equipment box, stuck it on the crack, and then carefully inserted a finely crafted metal tube on top of the explosive. It was a highly sensitive trigger detonator. As long as the shaped explosive deformed under the influence of external force, or the cracks under it expanded again, the fuse in the detonator would detonate the explosive. The yield of this explosive is very small. Even if someone accidentally steps on it, as long as the unlucky guy wearing the protective gear is of a slightly better quality, he will basically not be missing an arm or a leg. Its warning effect is far greater than its killing effect. Kaylan asked Leighton to set up such a warning beacon, also to prevent the monster under the ice from expanding the cracks and sneaking out again after they left here. No one would want an inhuman monster to follow the team unnoticed, let alone this monster with the power to easily kill the entire team. The team started to move forward, but before they got 100 meters away, they had to stop again. The ice path ahead suddenly became narrower, and the surrounding ice walls were no longer as flat and smooth as before. Instead, they were covered with a large number of growths. These growths were piled on top of the ice walls in layers, which reminded Kaylan of something. Lipid deposits attached to blood vessels in patients with atherosclerosis. After they got closer, they discovered that these growths were dark brown oval objects the size of fists. These objects were sticky to each other and tightly adsorbed on the ice wall, and their surfaces were covered with a thick layer of ice. Thick hoarfrost. What is this? Leighton stared at the growths in front of him with fear. They look disgusting to me. To be honest, I think it looks a bit like a cockroach's egg case, but this thing is hundreds of times larger than a cockroach's egg case, the Hound said solemnly. See, could it be a giant mutated cockroach? Martin suddenly interjected. I heard people say that after some Earth cockroaches escaped from the Ark, they strayed into high radiation areas and mutated. Not only have their bodies grown larger, they have even evolved the ability to walk upright. They also have hands like humans and have high IQs. I know the story you're talking about. It's an old-era science fiction comic, and it seems to be the work of a Japanese cartoonist, but that story takes place on Mars in the solar system, not Alpha. Kaylan said. There are indeed examples of cockroaches that were brought to Alpha Planet from the solar system by humans, but they have not reached such an exaggerated level. 50 years have not yet allowed such a low-level creature to evolve into the kind of thing in the comics. Degree. However, Kaylan changed the topic. If the size only increases hundreds of times, it is still very possible. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 273. I would rather meet a cockroach, even a giant cockroach hundreds of times bigger, the Hound whispered. Compared to those ghosts, cockroaches are cuter. When the Hound said this, Martin couldn't help but think of the hand that just disappeared under the ice. He nodded in agreement. I really think, it seems that this is indeed the case. Don't think about things too simply. Kaylan patted Leighton on the shoulder. Try to see if you can dig out an egg sheath from it. It should be possible. These things are not embedded in the ice. They just need to melt away the bit of ice that sticks to them. Leighton nodded. It's best not to use heating. I'm worried that the rising temperature will cause the contents of the egg sheath to hatch out. Kaylan said again, use pure physical means as much as possible. OK. Layton's robotic arm made a crisp click sound, and a palm-sized circular saw protruded from his palm and began to rotate at high speed. The circular saw's tooth blade is completely black, a bit like carbon fiber, but it also has the unique luster of metal materials. Kaylan knew at a glance that the tooth blade of this circular saw was made of 100% pure nino alloy. It is no exaggeration to describe it as cutting iron like clay. Layton raised the circular saw and cautiously approached an egg sheath at the outer end. When the whirling tooth blade came into contact with the ice, there was a tooth-piercing friction sound, and the fist-sized egg sheath responded. And Luo fell into the specimen box that had been connected below. The next delicate work cannot be completed by an electric circular saw. Kaylan asked Layton to use a mechanical arm to fix the egg sheath, while he held the lancet in one hand and a handle in the other. Use the smallest file. First use the file to remove the remaining ice ballast on the surface of the egg sheath, and then push the blade along the edge of the egg sheath little by little. Ian's hand was very steady, and the blade almost did not tremble at all, and it was inserted into the egg sheath very smoothly. There was something in there. I felt like the tip of the blade was hitting some soft tissue. But whether the thing inside is dead or alive can only be known after opening the egg sheath. Kaylan began to use slight force, using the edge of the egg sheath gap as a fulcrum, to slowly pry open the upper part of the egg sheath. Generally speaking, an earth cockroach egg sheath can hatch from 10 to 50 nymphs, depending on the species, but this giant egg sheath that was pried open contained hundreds of tiny nymphs. Of translucent vesicles, each of which is a separate larvae. But what are wrapped in these translucent vesicles are not cockroach nymphs, but curled up into balls, red flesh worms. The flesh worms inside these vesicles are still squirming slightly. They are alive. Kaylan, Hound, and Layton raised their heads and looked at each other at the same time. In each other's eyes, they all saw the kind of fear that was difficult to express in words. They are no strangers to this kind of bugs. Kaylan still clearly remembers how the people of the Mitsui Consortium were swallowed up by the tide composed of these bugs. They only take a few seconds to kill a person. All the flesh and blood on his body has been chewed up, not even the bones are left. Why did this thing appear here? The Hound said with a serious face. He raised his head and glanced at the ice road in front of him that was almost completely covered by such egg sheaths. He couldn't help but feel a sense of retreat, if these egg sheaths are filled with this kind of bugs. He did not continue speaking, but Kaylan and the others knew exactly what he wanted to say. If these red meat worms with egg sheaths broke out of their shells when they passed through this passage, the entire team would be destroyed in an instant. Destroyed in between. When he thought of those bugs burrowing under his skin and walking freely through his flesh and blood, Kaylan couldn't help but feel bursts of itching all over his body. Even if he really had to face death one day, he would never choose this way. Just thinking about it is a way to die that makes one's hair crawl. Then what should we do? We can't go back, right? Layton frowned and said, Old go, Kaylan, you two have many ideas, you decide. At this moment, Qin Zhao's voice suddenly came from behind. That's it, this kind of insect, is there anything wrong with it? You seem to be very scared. Kaylan glanced at her. In view of the confidentiality agreement they signed, the truth about the Leviathan incident cannot be revealed, but it is still very simple to explain the horror of this insect. These bugs feed on humans, or rather, not just humans. They will devour any living organism they can come into contact with and can digest it in a very short time. They move very quickly and gather like a tide. They are unstoppable. Even flamethrowers and energy shields can hardly stop these bugs. If all the bugs in these egg sheaths hatch out, the few of us are far from enough to fill their teeth. Hearing what Kaylan said, Qin Zhao's originally light-skinned face suddenly became paler, and Martin even began to frantically groping at himself with an unnatural look on his face. I feel so itchy. Could there be bugs crawling on me? He said hurriedly. If there were really bugs crawling on your body, even if it was just one, you would have lost several pieces of flesh by now. Kaylan glanced at him and said in a deep voice, itching is due to psychological effects. Don't scare yourself on. Oh, Martin nodded hurriedly. Then, is there any way to kill this kind of insect? As I just said, flamethrowers, energy shields or other explosives can easily kill individual bugs, but it's useless. Useless. The number of them is really too huge, you can't kill them all, and when the bugs in front die, the ones behind will immediately eat the corpses of the same kind and turn them into parts of themselves. You can even reduce the insect tide. It's impossible to do it on such a scale. Hiss. Martin grinned and couldn't help but take a breath of cold air. Senior, what should we do now? Go forward or retreat? There is no other choice. The Hound looked back at the ice road behind him and said, to go forward, you have to step on the egg sheaths of these insects. No one knows whether they will hatch suddenly. From now on, I can only go back to those 9 stone rooms and be suffocated to death there. There is a third way, Kaylan said. There was a crack in the ice where the hand was. If the crack is dug, there may be a third passage below. Kaylan, are you crazy? Then I would rather step on these egg sheaths and walk forward. The Hound couldn't help but said. Actually, my choice is the same as yours. I'm just talking. Kaylan shrugged. The temperature in the ice tunnel is very low. These egg sheaths should be sealed here by the Alpha people, so I think there is a high probability that they will not incubation. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 274. As soon as he heard that he was going to pass through the egg sheath covered ice tunnel in front of him, Martin's face suddenly showed a look of extreme reluctance, but compared to the third path mentioned by Kaylan, he could only hold on. Scalp followed the others. Pay attention to where you land, and be careful not to step on these egg sheaths, Kaylan said. At this time, the team's position changed again. Kaylan returned to the vanguard position, and the task behind the break was to hand over Gavehound and Zaligatu. The surface of these egg sheaths is covered with a layer of hard ice. To be honest, the hardness is not low. Even a modified person with extraordinary tonnage like Leighton can step on it without any damage. This discovery finally made Kaylan feel a little relieved. If it were other bugs, if the egg sheath ruptures before the larvae mature, the larvae will basically die, but this red flesh bug is different. This creature cannot even be regarded as a bug in the conventional sense. When they gather together, they can even build a giant beast like Leviathan. This alone is enough to overturn the biological theory that humans have developed for thousands of years. Kaylan didn't dare to treat these things as ordinary bugs. The team moved very slowly because these egg sheaths were not only hard, but also very smooth. Because they were covered with a thin layer of ice, stepping on them was no different from stepping on the ice, and they were not uneven hemispherical shapes. On the ice, every time you step down, you have to spend several times more energy to find a stable foothold. The whole person must also tense up at all times to maintain the balance of the body. I always have the feeling that, what I'm stepping on is not insect egg sheaths, but mines. The Hound couldn't help complaining. The arrangement of these egg sheaths was very irregular, and everyone basically trudged among them. Martin and Qin Zhao even slipped a few times. Fortunately, the egg sheaths they bumped into did not appear. Any changes? After advancing for about 200 meters, the egg sheaths attached to the ice road finally disappeared. The hunter couldn't help but let out a long breath and said, finally, he crawled out of that pile of disgusting eggs. Damn, my ankles are almost cramped. This ice road, could it be the spawning ground of these insects? But why is it in Li? Leighton suddenly came to his senses when he said this. He glanced at Qin Zhao and the two people behind who were confused, and did not continue. It seems that our previous speculation was correct. This twin ruins should be the place where the Alpha civilization developed biological weapons. Just like the research institute on the Ark, Kaylan said. That would be troublesome. The security measures in the institute are so perverted that not even a mosquito can fly in. If this place is the research institute of the Alphas, tisk tisk. Layton shook his head. The situation is not optimistic. Hearing what he said, the Hound gave Layton another roll of his eyes. Can you close that crow mouth of yours? You don't know what to say all day long. Old man, you are too superstitious. You can't blame me for this kind of thing. Layton said aggrievedly. Anyway, can you just stop talking nonsense? I'm annoyed by it, Hound scolded. The problem now is how to get out of this ruins. Don't think about it. Look at that guy named Martin. Little bastard, I'm almost scared out of my wits when you say that. I'm actually fine. Martin said weakly, but his trembling fingers and the stiff look on his face completely betrayed his true thoughts. There's nothing wrong with being a coward. Only cowards live longer, but it's not enough to be too cowardly. If you're too timid, you might as well change your career as soon as possible. Hound stepped forward and patted Martin's shoulder hard, but the latter's knee was so weak that he almost sat down on the ground. Fortunately, the Hound had quick eyesight and quick hands. He grabbed the opponent's arm and lifted him up with force. But at this moment, the Hound suddenly let go of his hand as if he had seen a ghost, and then kicked Martin to the ground. He fell back several meters. What is that on your wrist? The Hound shouted sharply. Looking along the beam of the flashlight in the Hound's hand, everyone discovered that Martin's exposed wrist was stained with a bright red color, and there were many bumps the size of rice grains bulging on the surface of the skin. Martin looked down and was immediately frightened to the point of confusion. He grabbed his arm tightly and was about to scream, but found that a roll of bandage was suddenly stuffed into his mouth, blocking his voice in his throat. Don't get excited, calm down, maybe you can still be saved. The person who put the bandage on was Kaylan. He had already put on rubber gloves at this time, and several sharp medical knives were already clamped between his fingers. Martin stared in horror, looked at Ian's scalpel, and then at his wrist. He struggled nervously, wanting to speak, but couldn't. Seeing this, Kaylan reached out and pulled the bandage out of his mouth. Senior, are you planning to cut off the handle of my hand? He said incoherently, with an obvious cry in his voice. Let me check it first. It doesn't necessarily require amputation, Kaylan said, raised his head and glanced at the others. You should also check yourselves to see if there are any similar symptoms on your skin, especially if you are exposed. Parts. After speaking, Kaylan picked up the largest surgical scissors, cut lengthwise along Martin's cuffs, and unfolded the layers of thick fabric to both sides. The red area is about 8 centimeters long, extending from the wrist to 1/3 of the lower end of the forearm. The outside is lighter in color and the inside is darker. As for the rice-shaped lumps, they are only found on the inside of the wrist. Do you feel itching or pain? Kaylan asked Martin. No, the latter was stunned for a moment, then shook his head vigorously. What about now? Before Kaylan finished speaking, the blade of the scalpel had already stabbed into the red skin, and the tip of the knife penetrated 1/2 centimeter diagonally. Ah! Hiss, huh! Martin's cry of pain was half sent out before he swallowed it himself. He looked at the blade that had stabbed into his wrist with a puzzled look on his face. His expression was first confused, then frightened. Okay, it seems like I can't feel it at all. Pain? Ah! Senior, my hand, is it useless? It's not possible to draw a conclusion so early, Kaylan said seriously, while the few people watching beside him didn't even dare to express their anger. Since you can't feel the pain, then I won't use anesthesia. Layton, use a robotic arm to hold him down and keep him from moving as much as possible. In addition, do not have direct contact with his body, and the parts of indirect contact must also be disinfected later. As he spoke, Kaylan had already turned the blade and cut open a lump the size of a rice grain. The mass ruptured, and clear thick liquid mixed with a streak of blood flowed out. "What is this?" the hound couldn't help but ask. "I don't know." Kaylan shook his head. He took out a test tube used to hold the specimen and used tweezers to squeeze all the liquid in the mass into the test tube. But after the pus in the mass was squeezed out, the red skin around the mass returned to its original color, and Martin's face also showed a look of pain. "Hiss, it hurts, I can feel the pain again, what's going on?" "Although I don't know the principle, it seems that as long as you squeeze out the contents of these lumps, your arm can return to normal," Kaylan said, took out a needle and inserted a few needles into the middle of Martin's forearm. Suddenly, Martin's newly recovered pain sensation disappeared again. "Senior, I can't feel the pain anymore." "What Kaylan just gave you was a occlusive injection, lidocaine mixed with dexamethasone solution." "It would be damned if you can still feel pain," Hound said angrily. Although he is not a doctor, he is familiar with those commonly used medicines. "I still recognize the signs. As a lone hunter, I basically have to deal with the emergency treatment of major and minor injuries by myself. If you open the first aid kit and don't even know how to use the things inside, then you probably don't know how many people have died." Times. After anesthesia, Kaylan incised several tumors in succession. After squeezing out all the thick fluid in these tumors, Martin's arm finally returned to its original color. Finally, Kaylan rinsed the cut area several times with alcohol solution, then wrapped it with a bandage and sealed it with an isolation film like plastic wrap. It is actually very difficult to completely remove the pus in the mass with this method alone, Kaylan said. He couldn't help but think of Ivan's infection with the corrosive seed. "In fact, it is best to amputate the limb. This method is the safest." "Really, amputation?" Martin couldn't help being shocked and quickly reached out to cover his arm. "But there are no conditions for amputation surgery now. If you amputate your limbs directly, you will most likely die from massive bleeding or wound infection," Kaylan said, "but if you don't amputate your limbs, there is a possibility of recurrence at any time. You must always pay attention to yourself. The wound changes, and other people must keep a safe enough distance from you." Okay, I remember. I will pay attention to it myself." Martin nodded repeatedly when he heard that amputation was not needed. "If there is a chance to return to the Ark, even if the wound has not changed, we must conduct deep debridement again. Do you understand what I mean?" "I see. As for this," Kaylan raised the test tube containing pus in his hand, "I will hand this thing over to the people above. Someone from the Research Institute or the Security Bureau may come to you later, so be prepared." "Prepare? Security Bureau?" Martin couldn't help but shudder when he heard the word. I won't be silenced, right?" "Thinking too much. Do you really think that the people in the Security Bureau are all executioners?" Kaylan glanced at him speechlessly. "However, if they really send people to find you, it means there is a big problem with this thing. At that time, if something happens to your body, only they will be able to help you." "Will I be put on the autopsy table?" Martin asked. "It's possible," Kaylan nodded, "but if things develop to that point, even if you slip away from them, you won't live long, and your end may even be worse than being on the autopsy table." "Worse than going to the autopsy table?" Martin's face suddenly turned pale. "Senior, I don't understand what you mean." "Then it's better not to understand." Kaylan took off his gloves and stuffed them into a sealed waste bag along with the used surgical instruments, and then made a gesture to Leighton that only they themselves could understand. The meaning of the gesture is, keep an eye on Martin. He didn't know what these pus were, and he couldn't even determine whether these substances were related to the red meat worms in the egg sheaths, but one thing that was certain was that this thing could infect humans, and as an infected person, Martin has become an unstable factor in the team. Although he has not mutated or otherwise changed, this does not mean that his condition can remain in its current state. If he were replaced by a more cold-blooded hunting group leader, he might choose to abandon him directly, from a certain perspective. Only in this way can this unstable factor be completely eliminated. Let's go, keep going. After the surgery just now, the atmosphere in the team became a little more depressed. Even the hounds didn't speak much. Everyone walked in silence, but as they walked, Kaylan always felt that the surrounding environment seemed to be starting to change. It got weird. But this strange feeling does not come from vision, but a kind of alertness that arises from deep within. Something's not right, Kaylan said softly. What's wrong? Asked the hound. I can't tell, Kaylan shook his head. Is it possible that you are too nervous? Hound rubbed his chin. This kind of ghost place, to be honest, everything is wrong. If it is right, then there is something wrong. No. It's not that feeling, it's just. Kaylan rubbed his forehead. He wanted to express his feelings, but found that he couldn't find the right words to describe them. At this time, Leighton, who was walking at the front of the team, suddenly let out a whisper, "Hey, there seems to be something on the ground in front of us." What? Hearing this, the hound immediately raised the gun in his hand and pointed the crosshair at the dark ice road ahead. Go over and have a look, Kaylan suggested. Leighton and hound nodded. The three of them raised their weapons and walked up with very light steps. And when they finally saw that thing that Leighton was talking about, they immediately stood still as if struck by lightning. A piece of clay explosive covered several cracks in the ice, with a metal detonator stuck on it. Hiss, why did we come back again? The hound muttered in a low voice. Those are my explosives and detonators. Leighton said with a sullen face, this is impossible, this is absolutely impossible. The ice road is a straight passage with no turns or forks. Logically speaking, it is impossible for them to go back. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 275. The three people following behind also walked up. When they saw the explosives and detonators, they also showed expressions similar to those of Kaylan and the others. Is this ice path a closed loop? We made a circle in it, Qin Zhao guessed. Impossible, this ice road is very straight, I can hardly feel the curvature of it. If it is a circular structure, it will be a long distance to go around, and we are walking now. The distance we have passed is only a few hundred meters. Leighton shook his head repeatedly and said, and if it is a closed loop, then where did the underwater passage we came out of go? No, Leighton, I think what she said makes sense. Kaylan walked to the crack and squatted down. The underwater passage appears out of thin air, and it is normal for it to disappear out of thin air. As for this ice passage, there is actually a very simple way to verify whether it is straight or curved. As he spoke, Kaylan opened a laser sight on the front of the pistol, and a red laser shot out directly in front of the ice road. But what surprised everyone was, the laser that was supposed to go in a straight line turned out to be tens of meters away. The outside curved strangely to one side, and finally a circular spot of light was reflected on the ice on that side. Actually, this ice road is just a circle, but our senses are distorted by some imperceptible force. The weird feeling I just felt probably came from here, Kaylan said. At Ian's suggestion, everyone walked a little further, and sure enough, the ice path covered by egg sheaths appeared again, and they also found the traces that Leighton had cut with a circular saw. The same goes for walking backwards, Kaylan said. This ice road is not long, but it has no end. So, we just came out of the 9 stone rooms, and we were trapped again. The hound took a deep breath and tugged on the equipment straps a little irritably. No, there is a third way. You mean? Hound took a breath. Isn't this too crazy? Are you sure? Otherwise, we continue to circle in this ice road, Kaylan said. On the contrary, I feel that hand is one of the clues left by the designer of the ruins. Under the ice, there is a real outlet. But, if, what if, I mean, if we hit that hand, that monster, we will die. What should we do? Martin tried his best. He shook his head and said, his word order was quite confusing, and his fear was palpable. Kaylan looked forward. The ice road extended into the shadows beyond his sight. The darkness seemed endless. But they all knew that as long as they moved forward, they would be back to the starting point again soon. But there is only one way we can go, Kaylan said. Among the 9 stone chambers, the stone platform and the person trapped in the nightmare were the first clues. Following this clue, Kaylan and the hounds discovered the secret of the movement trajectory of the stone chambers, and obtained the title of Double Moon Inner Eclipse. The first clue, and in this circular ice tunnel, the hand under the ice and the cracked ice surface are obviously the lead to the second clue. Even if there is no exit below, there must be clues related to the exit. A famous Russian playwright in the old era once said a famous saying, if the script of the first act states that there is a gun hanging on the wall, then in the subsequent plot, the gun will definitely be used. Start. Otherwise, there would be no point in writing this gun at all. Judging from the design of the 9 stone chambers, Kaylan has roughly figured out the idea of the designer of the secret room. The other party is pursuing the ultimate introduction, and everything that appears in the environment is indispensable in the decryption process. Important factor, and the fact is indeed as he judged. In short, anything that appears in the secret room must be used, which naturally includes the bird sealed under the ice. Palm. The only thing that breaks this logic is the egg sheaths of those red meat worms. Those things. No, that's not right. Kaylan suddenly shivered. Those egg sheaths were also part of the secret room. An hourglass hanging upside down could not help but appear in Ian's head. These egg sheaths, they were timers. When the countdown ends, the bugs in the egg sheaths will hatch out and clean up the entire circular ice channel. Thinking of this, Kaylan immediately raised his head and looked at Layton, asking, what is the temperature in the ice channel now? Is it hotter than just now? Hey, Kaylan, if you don't tell me, I haven't noticed yet. The temperature seems to have risen a lot higher than before. I thought it was because our clothes were dry. Layton said, glancing at the clothes on his body. An instrument for measuring temperature. When I first came out of the underwater channel, I remember it was -4 degrees Celsius, tisk, now it's actually 2 degrees above zero? A full 6 degrees higher? Huh. It's risen by 1 degree again. It's 3 degrees Celsius. Sure enough, Kaylan gritted his teeth and told everyone what he had just guessed. For a moment, everyone's expressions turned a little ugly. It seems that this is the only way to go, the hound's side. When the temperature rises to a certain level and the bugs in the egg sheaths hatch, those alphas who designed this ruins are really awesome. Mom is nothing, now it's better, even starving to death has become a luxury. It's best for everyone to be mentally prepared. I estimate that, except for the stone chamber at the starting point, every subsequent level should have a time limit. Kaylan said, we can't go on like this any longer. We have to take action immediately. The team returned to where the rift was. Although the terrifying palm had disappeared, it made the darkness under the ice deeper, and an unspeakable depressive atmosphere spread among the team. According to Ian's request, Layton first removed the detonator of the explosive set on the crack, and then used the circular saw made of nanoalloy to expand the crack on the ice little by little. Compared with the adhesion between the egg sheaths, the ice ballast was much harder, and a series of sparks burst out the moment the tooth blade came into contact with the ice surface. At the same time, a harsh noise like nails scraping against a blackboard at high speed filled the ice path. Kaylan stared closely at the cracks on the ice, watching the circular saw embed bit by bit. If this saw blade was made of other materials, I am afraid those toothed edges would have been scrapped long ago. Layton put 2 more energy-filled crystals into the engine. Suddenly, the speed of the circular saw became faster, and the sparks even splashed onto the top wall of the ice tunnel. Several tripods were detached from Layton's robotic arm. Each tripod had a suction cup at the end, which was firmly attached to the ground, while his other hand was holding onto the machine tightly. A pull ring on the upper end of the arm forces the circular saw downward. Listening to the sound of the teeth rubbing against the ice, the hound felt a sense of irritation for no apparent reason. Cursing, he pulled out 2 wads of cotton wool from the damaged areas of his cold weather suit and stuffed them into his ears. The vibrations of the toothed blades were transmitted along the ice, and even the people standing on the ice felt the tremors. But at this moment, Layton's wrists suddenly sank, and the tremors immediately disappeared. "I saw through, there's nothing under the ice," Layton shouted. He added, "The corner of ice that I sawed off fell down. There is a passage underneath, it's a shaft drilled into the ice. So, that thing was clinging to the wall of this shaft before, and then fell down again." The hound dug out the cotton wool in its ears. "Is this right? If this thing can really be there, it would be too humming unscientific to move freely in an ice layer that is denser than steel." Not only the hounds, but also other people in the team, including Kaylan, somewhat relieved some of the pressure in their hearts after hearing the news. Although in the ruins of Alpha civilization, many things cannot be mastered by humans at all. It can be explained by scientific principles, but when something that originally seemed weird suddenly becomes consistent with scientific theory, it can still bring a little comfort to people. At least, this thing must comply with the most basic laws of physics, then it shows that the means based on these basic physical laws can have an effect on this thing. If it is really a monster that can move freely through ice layers that are denser than steel, then Kaylan and the others can almost throw away the guns in their hands. They can ignore these solid ices, and that bit of alloy. What kind of threat can a material warhead pose to it? In this case, the same should be true for the big eyeball. Layton nodded. There should be a special space for it to move in the ice, just like the track under the mobile surveillance camera. These ice layers have an extremely complex structure inside, and they are not as solid as we first imagined. Kaylan glanced at the bowl-sized ice hole that Layton sawed open, and said thoughtfully. This time, their conversation did not avoid Qin Zhao and Martin. After hearing what Layton said, the former immediately grabbed the key word in it and asked, "Big eyes? What, eyeballs? It's better that you don't know about this thing." Hound pouted. "You little girl seems to be quite courageous, but I'm worried that the other rookie will be scared to death." Qin Zhao couldn't help but glance at Martin, who trembled like a frightened bird. What is it?" "Nothing." Kaylan shrugged and said to Qin Zhao, "If you want to know the things we mentioned, you can consider joining our hunting group. Of course, the premise is that we can get out of here alive." "Your hunting group?" Qin Zhao was slightly startled. In her impression, Kaylan and his team should be composed of a group of senior hunters with free status. There is no such thing in the exploration records of the A-087 ruins. Speaking of the hunting group they belong to, have they been recruited by a hunting group during this period? "The hunting group we formed ourselves is at the consortium level, which is a level higher than Polaris," the hunting group said with some pride. "Of course, it has not been officially registered yet and is currently performing qualification certification tasks." "Qualification certification mission? Is that why you came to the bottomless sinkhole?" Qin Zhao asked again. "Yes. Okay, let's not talk about this for now. Time is pressing. Layton, can you use a laser rangefinder to measure the depth of the shaft?" Kaylan said. "Well, I'm measuring it," Layton said, and a crimson laser shot downwards at a completely perpendicular angle to the ice surface. However, it didn't take long for Layton's expression to become weird. "What's going on?" Kaylan asked. "The laser seems to have been swallowed," Layton replied hesitantly. Even he himself was a little confused as to what happened. "The laser was swallowed." The hound rubbed his huge aquiline nose vigorously. "You mean there is a black hole underneath? How is this possible?" "It doesn't have to be a black hole." Kaylan shook his head. Maybe there is some device that can interfere with light. In other words, it is not the light that is interfered with, but our senses. Just like this seemingly straight, it's like a circular ice track. Then what should we do? We don't even know how deep it is. Should we just jump in? The hound said anxiously. He turned his head and glanced at the direction of the ice path near the egg sheath concentration area. Leighton, how high has the temperature risen? Kaylan asked. 6 degrees above zero, Leighton replied. Lee, the average temperature in that place is 8 to 11 degrees Celsius. The temperature in the mine is relatively higher, around 15 degrees Celsius. The current temperature should be very close to the temperature required for the hatching of those bugs. I can't wait any longer. There are so many, let's widen the crack first. As he spoke, Kaylan had already pulled out a folding ice axe from his body, inserted the front end of the ice axe into a crack, and began to strike with the handle of the pistol as a hammer. Leighton, on the other hand, simply pushed the circular saw outward along the previously cut crack, widening it as much as possible. Oh, never mind, it's better to fall to death than to be eaten by bugs anyway. The hound felt worried, groped in the equipment bag for a while, took out a hand axe, and hammered the ice. Although these ice cubes were as hard as iron, the fine cracks inside them were constantly increasing. Finally, when the hound rounded the hand axe and smashed it down for the 55th time, only a click was heard, and those fine cracks were heard. The line suddenly spread, and the originally translucent ice layer was suddenly covered with white cracks, becoming like a piece of tempered glass that had been hit hard. Danger, retreat! Kaylan shouted, and he pulled the hound and quickly retreated out of the range of the crack. On the other side, Leighton also put away the bracket in time, and jumped back a big step. With a swish sound, the broken ice fell into the deep well, and a circular wellhead with a diameter of about 2 meters appeared in front of everyone. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 276. Leighton drove an anchor into the ceiling directly above the shaft and dropped the rappel with weights attached to it into the shaft. Accompanied by the swish sound of friction between ropes, it didn't take long for the finger-thick rappelling rope to collapse straight. Leighton tried to lift it, and then shook his head at Kaylan. This 200-meter-long rope, none of the rappels could touch the bottom of the ice track. Although it can be extended in the future, but the total length of all the remaining ropes we have is only 300 meters. If the depth of this shaft exceeds 500 meters, we will have to climb down little by little, Leighton said. Although the diameter of the wellhead is quite wide, you can wear an exoskeleton down there, but in terms of safety, an exoskeleton without a propeller. That's all we can do, Kaylan said. Distribute the equipment, and then we'll go down. Kaylan and the others brought down a total of 6 powered exoskeletons, but 2 of them were seriously damaged, 1 was slightly damaged, and only half of them could still perform full climbing functions. Although Leighton dismantled one of the severely damaged exoskeletons and used it to repair the other 2, in the end he only obtained 4 intact exoskeletons and 1 that was partially functional and could only be regarded as a half-defective products. 6 people, 4.5 exoskeletons, how do you plan to divide them up? The hound's eyes swept over each person, and then stopped at Kaylan. My mechanical prosthetic body also has some rock climbing capabilities, so I can just use that half body, Leighton said first. The big guy is in the vanguard position, and he is still using defective products, so he will definitely not be able to lead people. There are still 4 exoskeletons and 5 people left. In addition, we still have 3 guys who can't move and need to take them, the hound continued. Kaylan, as the leader of the hunting group, you are responsible for allocating this matter. Yes, Kaylan nodded and pointed at Martin, who was huddled in the corner. First of all, Martin is infected, so he cannot have direct contact with other people, so he needs an exoskeleton. Now there are 3 exoskeletons left, 4 movable people and 3 immobile ones. Jolagita's own exoskeleton is an enlarged one and should be able to carry 2 people, and then Lao go and I will go on our own. Bring one. After saying that, Kailan turned to Qin Zhao, choose whoever you want to bring. Qin Zhao looked at the hound, then at the tall Zhou Lejitu, and finally pointed his finger at Kailan and said, I'll go with you. Tisk, sure enough, young pretty faces are more marketable in the eyes of girls. Hound couldn't help but complain, and then tied the body bag containing Cao Fen to his back. Oh, little sister, when you grow up in the future, you will be able to appreciate the charm of a mature old man like me. Come on, it's just you. Leighton smacked his lips. I don't see the charm. I just see that your head is getting bald. Joking aside, everyone quickly put on their equipment. As for Qin Zhao, he fixed himself on Kailan's back brace in a back-to-back manner, although it sounds ambiguous. In fact, the relationship between the two people, there was no physical contact. The hard exoskeleton covered almost 90% of Kailan's back. He could only feel the cold metal parts. As for things like warm-scented nephrite, it was a joke. It's just that, due to the angle, Qin Zhao's long ponytail tied behind his head just fell into Kailan's back collar. The girl's hair would brush against the back of Kailan's neck from time to time, not counting the distance. There was a thick layer of lining, and Kailan thought some small bugs had fallen in. When he tried his best, he happened to catch the other party's ponytail. After Qin Zhao let out a cry of pain, Kailan realized what he had grabbed in his hand. He quickly let go and said sorry to the girl behind him. However, Qin Zhao's reaction was a bit unexpected for Kailan and the others. She took out a folding knife from her pocket, opened it, held her ponytail in one hand, raised the knife with the other hand, and directly cut off her long ponytail. He cut it off completely and put it back into his pocket along with the folding knife. The hunting dog was stunned for a moment, then gave Qin Zhao a thumbs up and said, Hey, girl, with just one strike of yours, our hunting group will be sure to kill you. Now, Qin Zhao was a little embarrassed. I just think long hair is really a burden. I've seen a lot of girls. Hound suddenly showed a look of disdain on his face. I used to know a female secretary. I heard that she got her job through connections. But I don't know what went wrong and she was assigned to the field force. Good guy. Half of the carry-on luggage was filled with various underwear, and the other half was filled with cosmetics and hair conditioners. All the assigned self-defense weapons were thrown away in the dormitory. The reason was that the secretary did not need them. Participate in the battle? Damn, that kind of woman makes me annoyed when I see her. Then, what happened to the secretary? Qin Zhao couldn't help but ask. Dead. The Hound shrugged. The army suffered a defeat and was almost wiped out by a large group of indigenous creatures. When retreating in a hurry, she accidentally fell off the off-road vehicle. Logically speaking, wearing that standard armor, she could always survive a fall, but that girl's beautiful long golden curly hair was caught in the tank tracks. Half of her head was crushed, and red and white were scattered all over the floor. Vomit. As soon as the Hound finished speaking, Martin couldn't help but let out a retching sound. He glanced at the others in embarrassment and wanted to try to move his exoskeleton, but due to an operation error, he stumbled and fell to the ground. Don't touch the red trigger, Leighton immediately scolded. That's the emergency release lock used to release the support joint of the knee. It's used to help you escape when the exoskeleton is stuck on the terrain. Hug, sorry, I accidentally touched it, Martin said quickly to Leighton. It's useless for you to say sorry to me. It's you who will die if something goes wrong, but if other people are affected because of you, then it's useless for you to say sorry. Do you understand? After saying that, Leighton looked at it again. He glanced at the thermometer and said, Kailan, it has risen by 1 degree again. There is no time. Yes, I understand. Kailan nodded. Everything is ready. If you have any questions, let's go down now. As the pioneer, Leighton was the first to enter the shaft. He hung the lock buckle around his waist on the rappel, used the hooks and robotic arms of the exoskeleton to support the walls of the shaft on both sides, and began to move slowly and slowly. It slid down towards the bottom of the well at a rapid speed. Behind him is Kailan with Qin Zhao. Kailan followed Leighton's example and stretched out his exoskeleton arms to both sides and pressed them against the well wall to control the speed of descent. Qin Zhao, who was back to back with him, was holding an arm. The steel pipe temporarily modified by Leighton. This steel pipe was originally part of the cutting frame. Leighton cut it off, but retained the two blasting bolts at the end. If Ian's exoskeleton malfunctions, the steel pipe in Qin Zhao's hand was used as the last resort. It may be difficult for two people to hang on the well wall with only one steel pipe, but it is completely enough to be used as a brake to slow down. Even if Kailan and the others did not choose the fastest gear, the speed of rappelling was still much faster than climbing. In less than 5 minutes, Leighton had reached a depth of 200 meters. The first rope the end of. The structure is still the same below. Without any changes, Leighton shined the searchlight downwards. For some reason, within this shaft, the light of the searchlight could only illuminate a distance of about 50 meters at most. If it were placed on the ground, such intensity of light can easily penetrate several kilometers of night, but here, the dark eye seems to have the ability to swallow light, and no matter how bright the light is, it cannot shine very far. Continue to descend, Kailan said. Leighton connected another 200-meter-long rope, but this time, after throwing the weight down, he heard a muffled dong sound. This muffled sound couldn't help but cheer up everyone's spirits. I calculated the time of falling. The bottom of the well is about 150 meters away from our current location, Kailan said. He pointed the laser transmitter downwards, but the red laser could not penetrate the rich color below. The darkness gives people the illusion that this shaft seems to be bottomless. Then it adds up to 350 meters. I thought it was a few thousand meters deep. No, that's it, the hound's voice came down from above. In this shaft, no light can shine very far, so it creates this illusion, Kailan explained, but as soon as he said the sentence, he felt something wrong. The light above in the ice tunnel, their perception was disturbed, and they regarded the circular ice tunnel connected from end to end as a straight passage. If it were not for the signs like cracks and egg sheaths, they might have walked along without realizing it, and in this shaft, what is disturbed becomes light. Why did the designers of the ruins create such interference? Are they simply trying to make their escape more difficult, or are they trying to conduct some sort of test? Kailan didn't know, but the only thing that was certain was that the mechanism of this ruins had a power that they could not resist. They could only act according to the ideas of the ruins designer and were completely unable to resist it. Then another question arises: what is the purpose of the ruins designers in creating these secret rooms? This is definitely not one of those entertainment facilities called escape room on the Ark. To be precise, this should be part of the entire biological weapons laboratory, but why is there such a room with a bunch of puzzles in the laboratory? What about the secret room? Kailan couldn't help but think of something called a hamster box. In the hamster box, even if the hamster successfully passed through all the mazes, it could not escape from the box. Kailan suddenly felt a sense of despair. Even if they can solve every puzzle smoothly along the way, will they definitely be able to escape from this ruins? No matter from which angle you look at it, it is impossible for the designer of this ruins to lead them to the real exit. The other end of the passage will always be the next test area. But Kailan knows that as the leader of the team, he must not say these negative speculations now. Everyone's mood is already very low. The hound teased Qin Zhao before was purely for the purpose of adjusting the atmosphere. If he let me tell you now, if there is no way out if we continue, I'm afraid the whole team will fall into despair. Kailan raised his head, looked at the hound directly above him, and showed a wry smile in the darkness. A human spirit like hound must have guessed something, but he also kept silent about it. As a field force officer who has commanded many battles, he understands the importance of morale better than Kaylan. 6. Everyone continued to slide down the rappelling rope. Finally, their solace once again stepped on solid ground. That's right, the ground, not the ice. To Ian's expectation, the end of the shaft turned out to be a man-made cave. There was no black ice here, only square rock pillars neatly arranged in the cave, supporting a height of about 20 meters. Flat dome. What is this place? Hound looked around with a flashlight. Why do I feel, this place looks like the elevated floor at the bottom of a modern building? I think it's more like an underground garage. Layton took over the conversation and said, by the way, Kaylan, does Alpha Civilization have the concept of private cars? I don't know if there are private cars, but their vehicle should be a shuttle-type aircraft that can travel between buildings at will. Kaylan replied, some hunters have found these aircraft in the ruins. Of course I know about that kind of aircraft. Many small anti-gravity devices currently on the market are disassembled from these aircraft, but I wonder if this kind of aircraft should be parked underground, right? Layton said. This place. Kaylan squatted down and rubbed a finger on the ground. It's like a battlefield, or, in other words, a gladiatorial arena. Why? The hound's nose twitched slightly. I can neither smell the smoke nor the smell of blood. Why do you think so? It's just a feeling. I don't know why, but when I see these neatly arranged columns, I can't help but think of the ancient Roman Colosseum on Earth. Kaylan said. At this moment, his peripheral vision saw a black shadow flashing behind a stone pillar, and Layton set up his machine gun at an extremely fast speed and aimed it at the stone pillar. Did you see it clearly? What is it? Kaylan asked immediately. No, Layton shook his head, but it seems to be a humanoid thing. Human form. When Layton said this, everyone in the team couldn't help but think of the hand that disappeared under the ice. Could this dark shadow be the owner of that palm?